Good day, YouTubers, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from all over the world. We're going to try to use this Sodium lacquolate, super glue, Sodium lacquolate. This is extra thick, 10 to 25 seconds. Instead of the regular super glue, which I've been using for all the strings and stuff, I want to try that because today we're at a point in our build where we need to do some rat lines. So last week we worked on the shrouds. We got all the upper shrouds done except for the very top. I think there's going to be 2 sets in the very top, and the foremast and the mainmast. But we got the main crow's nest shrouds done on both the starboard and the port side. And next in the instructions was to do some rat lines. And they're calling for every 5 millimeters. So if we look at these graph lines, they are exactly 5 millimeters apart. So I think this is going to work just fine as far as helping us keep these things in the proper spacing and the right amount as we go up, which is going to be a lot of them. So the last thing I did when I finished up last week was glue on some baling pin racks here for the main mast. And I noticed when I was looking at the instructions, I had 4 baling pin racks left over in the parts box that were already painted red on the edges, and it hadn't shown me where to put them, or if it did show me, I missed it. But I saw when I was looking at the directions for these rat lines that there was some baling pin racks here behind the shrouds on the main mast. So I went ahead and glued them on when I got done with the last shrouds up on the top crow's nest, or in the middle crow's nest. Those all went pretty quick, but when we first attempted to do, set you up here where you can see that. We attempted to do the little ladder that's here, so as they come up the main shrouds go into the middle toward the center of the crow's nest, and there's no way a sailor could climb in that hole because it's full of ropes, and he has to come out here on the edge and get up in order to climb onto the crow's nest. And they had shown a piece of string glued on there, and they're showing that again for the rat lines with the 5 millimeter spacing. So I'm looking at the plans here, and because they're showing just to glue that rat line on, not tying a knot. Not tying a knot. Normally on the past ships I built, we tied a clove hitch knot on every shroud, on every rat line, which was hundreds of knots by the time you go around the whole ship. But this one is showing just to glue them on there and cut them off when you got the excess hanging out. So like that San Juan there, all those knots are clove hitch knots on every rat line going across. There's another clove hitch and another one and another one as it passes across each one of the shrouds. There's a separate clove hitch knot, and that took a lot of time. It makes it look more authentic. So I'm going to attempt, I think this is the correct size they want us to use, which is the smaller of the three, the black ropes. I'm going to double check that in the parts list. But I think that I can start on one end and then clamp it after it dries on the first shroud on the right or the left. Line it up with the graph paper, and then after I got it clamped, do the other end, and then do the ones in the middle. I got to do some trial and error here to see. And the reason I'm doing trial and error, because when I did these ones up here, I had a real hard time getting the spacing to work out and getting the rope to stick where I wanted it to without it moving. And oh man, it was just so cumbersome. So I came up with the idea of putting these wood dowels and tying them in there instead, and that eliminated that problem. Plus it gave me a good solid secure point to tie off these other lines that go up to the dead eyes, because all 3 or 4 of them dead eyes are from ropes down here, the same on the other one. So even though that works great there, I can't put a wooden dowel for every rat line. I've got to run a rope across there instead. So now I got to figure out how I'm going to do it, what the best glue to use to do it, and so on. I've got some of the regular cheap super glue with cyadium acrylate is cyadium acrylate, and that's what I've been using when I did all these shrouds and dead eyes. I have used this in a lot of other places and it seems to be okay, but I've got to experiment to see which is going to be the best one to work with. That's going to be drying quick enough where I can move on ahead after I get one done, put another one on and glue it and keep on moving, because there's a lot of them on there. I haven't counted how many lines are on that graph paper, but there's probably well, that's an easy way to calculate. This ruler is 300 millimeters, So for the main mast, we got like this is the millimeter side. We got like 225 millimeters. So 5 divided by 225. I always like to know the overall number. $45 rat lines for the main mast on one side, so that's going to be close to 100 just for the main mast. You're probably close to that on the foremast and the rear. We're looking at close to 300 rat lines just for the lower section of shrouds. Isn't that lovely? So let me do some trial and error here and see how this is going to work out, what I'm going to do, and how I'm going to do it. And then I'll start filming again and see if we can capture some of this, maybe in time lapse or something. Okay. So we tried the thick first. Over here on the first one on the left, and of course it takes a lot longer to dry than regular, the thin stuff, but after it did dry, and I sort of had to hold it. The string was longer when it first started, and I actually had a clamp on this railing over here holding one side. My thumb was holding the other side while it dried, and I said, "Man, that's going to take forever." So on the second one, I tried the thin super glue, which is the normal stuff. It comes out like water almost, but this string soaks it up like a sponge, and I couldn't get the thing to stay where I wanted to before it would dry. So I said, okay, that's not going to work, which I thought this was going to be the best thing to use, but really it's not. So the problem with using the thick is I gotta put a dab on the main shroud and then stick the rope on there and sort of make it where it'll stay flat. I tried putting a little needle in the paper for it to rest on, making sure my shroud's not sticking to the paper. But if I put glue on one side and make sure that it's staying perpendicular right there where the glue is, I don't care if it sags down. The fuzziness of the string sort of make it, just stay there like a felt board, So, but I gotta wait for that to dry before I can mess with it, because if I touch it, it moves all around and it'll pull off and everything. So just getting it perpendicular at the first spot, let that dry, go ahead and move on to something else, do another one, and then do another one, then come back you know, and put some dabs of glue on the other end. And after that dries and the string is fairly straight, you know, go do something else while that one is drying. And then come back and put some dabs of glue on the shrouds in the middle, making sure you get a good dab that's going to actually grab the rope. So that seems to be the best plan of attack. I'll be working on all three of them at the same time instead of just one side and going up, because I've got to let, you know, a dab dry a little bit before I can touch it again and glue the rest of them on. So that's my plan of attack. We'll just keep moving the ship back and forth and sitting in front of it here. We got these tools that we're using. I cleaned off the glue off the tweezers so it doesn't stick to the rope when I touch it. Use these to cut the tails off when it's really dry, and some pins if I need to have something to rest on in the paper, and then some other tweezers I cleaned off, because once you get a dab of glue on the tweezers, you can't grab that rope again because it'll stick to the tweezers instead of where you want it to. So you got to have some spare tweezers ready in case you run into that problem. And then I use these to cut my pieces, and I'm making them a little long to start with, so I have a little control, but there's not too much weight out there. You know, it's a good thing that the felt effect and the fuzziness of the rope sort of makes the rope stick on there a little bit before you know, you can almost do like that. But once you touch it with the glue, it moves all around. So that's why you got your do a one spot, make sure it's straight, and then go do another one somewhere else. A little cumbersome, but it's gonna work, and I'll be able to work on all three masts at the same time. So other than going back and forth and trying to keep track of what isn't dry yet, it's gonna be okay, I think. So we'll just keep plugging away here and hopefully make some progress. I don't know. Well, it's a little slower going than I thought, but the problem I'm running into after, you know, gluing one spot and then coming over here and cutting a string and gluing one spot, and coming over here cutting a string and gluing one spot, and then going back and grabbing the other side of the other string. It's not quite dry enough yet so that I can tack it there and then do the ones in the middle. So it's having a tendency to move on me a little bit where the first glue was at, and I'm using the ship here and a dowel or something to pull the paper and the lines all flush against the paper, but that is causing the glue to stick to the paper sometimes. So I really got to put my dowel back here and then remove it soon after I glue. So what I'm going to do is because another thing I've noticed is that as I go up and they move a little bit, the one below it isn't quite dry yet either, and that changes the spacing in between the shrouds when I go to mess with it. So I'm going to let these dry, and that'll hold the shrouds good and solid and all even with each other, so that one isn't lower. Like this one here is lower than the other ones in the back, so the string doesn't want to touch it unless I force something behind there to make it come up. But with these amount glued on and they dry, that's going to help all the shrouds stay flat, so that when I glue the next one on, one of the shrouds isn't too far back to get contact. So before I continue on, I want to let this dry at least several hours, or tomorrow I'll come back and attack a few more. It's not going as fast as I thought, but it is definitely faster than tying, what did we say, 45 times 6, 270, not counting the top ones. Yeah, 300 knots plus. So we're going to come back tomorrow maybe and work on this some more. I want to let those dry, cut the tails off, see what it looks like. The tacky glue, or the thicker glue, is definitely better than the thin glue, so you want to use that. And you want something that'll dry, and because you're putting a blob on there to get them to stick together, and that blob is too much for that 10 to 25 second dry time, especially since you can't clamp it or whatever. It's just laying there by static or electricity or whatever, fuzziness. So we're going to let this dry and then come back later. Let's see what the hens are up to today. All the garden scraps they're working on from this morning. Where are the 3 Rhode Island red? They're hiding. Maybe we'll see one on the nest. Only one egg. Oh, they're all in here around the feeder. They're emptying out the feeder. I gotta fill that back up. We're just starting to get an egg or two from them. I don't know which one's laying yet. We had 4 eggs the other day, so that means one of them's laying, maybe 2. Hello. And we harvested some squash and zucchini and cabbage and tomatoes. don't know what happened to my potatoes down there. The other potatoes are doing good, but those ones ain't. I added a bunch of dirt. You're supposed to furrow up on the taters when they start getting tall. And I did not do any more strings because I wanted to make sure. Yeah, these are good and solid now. That'll work. It's just going to take a little longer than I thought, but less time than tying knots. Thanks for watching.